Hi, I'm Laura.
Hey, I'm Stefan, and you're listening to Attributed, a podcast library by Dreamdata.
The purpose of it is to store and share all the knowledge that we have gathered across Dreamdata employees through our LinkedIn Lives, podcasts, and webinars.
The typical topics you'll find here can be stuff like marketing,
Sales,
B2B ads,
operations,
social selling maybe. Hello and welcome everybody. Today it is attributed to Rob Kaminski, which I'm super glad that you're joining me today. We're going to talk about a topic that I've grown to care increasingly a lot about, which is mastering B2B position, and particularly on how to get it right at each stage. When do you stay very narrow in what you say about your company and your offering, and when do you start going wider? And one of the things I truly love sometimes, Rob, about you and Anthony's LinkedIn posts are the one where you say, when you reach gong stage or even larger, you can just say nothing because the brand is so strong that you don't actually have to say what you do anymore. That's where we're aspiring to go with Dream Data. And before we go there, there's still a lot of very specific product marketing and positioning we need to do. Rob, but for those who've never seen your LinkedIn post, never seen Anthony's Fledge PMM stuff, what's your background and what's the story about your company?
Yeah. Well, first off, thanks for having me. I'm really stoked to unpack some of this stuff. For those who aren't aware, I'm one of the co-founders of Fletch PMM. We call ourselves a product marketing consultancy, and we only do one thing, and we really are just helping founders and marketers explain their products to their ideal customers. We define that as positioning, figuring out who the ICP is, and our approach to it is a little unique where we use the homepage as really the main test of how clear you can actually be with your positioning, getting it into a short and really concise argument that articulates your value. And so we've been at this service specifically for the past 2 years, arguably 3 years, and we've worked with almost 500 B2B startups so far. And so I'm excited to share some of the experiences and stories, things that we've seen, working with companies that are pre-product all the way up to multi-product, big Series C, and even some large publicly traded companies, because they all kind of have similar challenges, but the positioning strategies they have to take are all very, very different.
I love it, Robin. And I think for everybody, just go check the Fledge PMM website to see just how attractive the logos that they've been managing to attract are. And then you'll believe Rob even more as he speaks through the things today. Rob, maybe I feel like we should help people understand a little bit about, if you've never heard about the topic of positioning before, if we start that basic, what's examples of a company that does good positioning and what's an example of a company who does bad positioning? And I can reveal, if you're able to say, we do website positioning for B2B startups, that's a pretty crisp explanation of what you do. But if you said, like, we do communication for all types of businesses in all over the world and all sorts of job functions and industries, so yeah, that's what we do.
Yeah.
That's probably not the best of positioning, right?
Probably not, but emphasis on probably, because what's really interesting when it comes to positioning is good is relative. And so, like, good positioning, bad positioning, when we look at good, we obviously think good is more specific, where people can understand what you do and make sure that it's memorable. But good positioning is just positioning that you can actually pull off in your go to market motions, right? And so, for most of the startups we work with, often our advice and recommendation is like, where really is your niche that you can dominate? Because you have to have momentum to then go after more markets and these bigger markets. And yeah, we do pick on really these successful companies a bit, because as you grow, the reality is that B2B markets are really fragmented and you can't truly position for all of them simultaneously. There is no like really clear way. And so your example of like, we help all types of companies with communication, that positioning, there are companies out there, probably large organizations, where like, sure, that is their global level positioning. Is it good? I mean, it's not good messaging, but if they have programs underneath it that are working, like, okay, maybe that is the positioning. And so things to keep in mind off your question. Good is relative. When we think of good with startups, it's all about, can you actually execute this? When you target a specific audience and you have a frame of argument, can you go execute it? Can you show up in the channels where they exist And what we find is that when you're early, if you end up with one of those broad, we're for everybody that doing all these different things, it just means you have to go run 12 go to market programs, which then we ask the follow up question, do you have the resources to do that? And, early stage startups like, well, how big's your marketing team? Well, it's like me. I have an intern. Like, we're thinking about bringing on an agency. It's like, yeah, good luck. Like, you're never going to carve out recognition in that space. And so it's like good's relative. You got to be able to pull it off. It should enable you. It should be easy then to go figure out what your go to market strategy is to go and execute that positioning. And then the last piece, and this is just different for every organization, it should leverage the advantages that you have, right? And what's hard for startups is they often don't have an advantage, right? And when we think of advantages, these are like, do you have a big network? Do you have access to some technology that nobody has? Are you really, really good at some go to market motion? Like, are you really good at LinkedIn content marketing? It's like, okay, like that starts to shape where you might position because then you can go execute it. And when you're early, sometimes the only advantage is specificity, is a willingness to say, you know what, I'm just going to focus on this small group. And that's why when you're super early, like that really niche approach of finding a really small market is often the positioning strategy. And so, tons of strategy of like areas of like that where it's like really good. I think of like any company we work with that's willing to say we're exactly for this group. We worked with a company called Toro TMS. They're a trucking management solution, and they, big trucking management. They just basically said, "Hey, we're the TMS for this one small group, which is this short hauler companies," and it was like that's good positioning for them because it's very narrow, but to other groups that wouldn't make sense. And so I'll pause there, but those are the kind of the three components, and it's really just more about execution because it's subjective.
Really good comments already, Rob, and I'm thinking a million things already. One of the things I think I would love to kind of unpack a little bit is just when you talk about pull it off or execute it. What are, if you like kind of were to do like check marks of what would
Yeah.
that kind of consist of? I have my ideas, obviously, that when you have a
Yep.
sales meeting, does the prospect respond well to what you say? But what are kind of all the elements of pulling it off or executing a positioning strategy?
Your question's so interesting, and we run into this a lot because positioning generally gets put in marketing's bucket of like, we have this product, now let's go position it. But positioning is really found it's like foundational with product management of like what problem are you actually solving? And so like product management and product marketing, they're just two sides of the same coin. And so first and foremost, like with a positioning, like are you spotlighting a real problem for a particular audience? And this gets awkward a little bit sometimes when we're working with clients where like we'll sort out all their positioning options and then we'll look at it and we're basically judging, is this a problem where we think somebody would pay attention to? And it's like, ooh. And that's not a positioning problem. That is like a business strategy problem of like, have you found something that's worthwhile? But more so along the lines of execution, what we're really weighting is how compelling is the argument. And I love that you gave the example of like when you're in front of somebody, because that's what we tell these founders, like, all right, you're in front of someone. If you said this, would you have confidence saying it? And then are you willing to say it for the next 2 or 3 years? Because these are longer term strategic bets. And we always get the question, how do I know if it's going to work? And the short answer is you don't. Like the nature of entrepreneurship and startups is like you're doing something that's never been done before. And if you're not, it just means you're building more of a commodity product, which is fine. And there are ways to position those. It's like a little way to de risk it. But there's always got to be this leap of faith of what do you see in the market that's broken? Are you willing to spotlight it? And then it's not something that just happens overnight. Right. And so that's where the execution comes in is just like, do you think you can get people to pay attention? Are you willing to stand in front of them and say it? And do you think you can change their behavior? And this is why it's so important. There's a lot written about founder-led sales. Like founders need to be the ones doing this in the trenches. And it's interesting when we work with folks, we always tell them like this messaging, even though we're documenting it on your homepage, you should be using in intro sales calls and networking events. Cause like I'm in front of you right now. I can see the whites of your eyes. When I say something that doesn't resonate, like your eyes are going to gloss over. And when I say something that's really interesting, you're going to lean in. Like those are the cues to know whether it's starting to work. And so I may have gone off the rails there a little bit, but like it comes down to conviction for the most part when
Mm.
we're evaluating options relative to how you think the market is going to respond, how the audience is going to respond to it.
Yeah, and I can just say, as someone who's been doing positioning for 3 or 4 years now, that I can definitely testify that it doesn't work if you do it like it's some kind of corner of your company. All the most important people in your company needs to be behind this because it's the messaging that goes out
Yeah.
through your ads, it's the messaging on your website, it's the segments, the audiences that you're trying to attract, it's the sales conversations, it's the
Oh, it's
customers
huge.
you win. But I think even more importantly, it's also if you manage to get a new customer with this positioning, will this customer likely renew their contract once the
Yeah.
contract cycle is over? Because did you completely oversell, promise something that you can't deliver on? Then that's also not a good positioning. So I think having that kind of make sure there's a senior level buy into it, but also make sure that you can actually live up to what you promise throughout kind of
Yeah.
the full funnel of a contract life cycle.
You nailed it there. You brought in the aspect of execution organization wide is so critical. We bump into this sometimes in our sessions because our deliverables, the homepage. But what we're really trying to say is like, hey, this is like we're putting a stake in the ground. Like this is our lighthouse. And everything else pre-website and post-website now has to adapt to the way that we want to show up. And you're spot on. When you don't have the buy-in of these groups and they're still going to be marketing the old way or marketing all these other pieces, you're creating a mismatch between how you're positioning and what your execution actually looks like. And
Uh,
that's oh yeah, sorry, go ahead.
But we went through let's call it a position expansion during spring. And the consequences of this is that we first of all we had this group of I don't know 5 to 6, 7 stakeholders that over the course of maybe 2 months had several like multiple meetings, sometimes every week. That's a lot of investment. But then afterwards, once you settle on the
Mm,
positioning, then the marketing team needs to go and create messaging, but the sales deck also needs to be updated. Maybe like in this case, we also need to adjust the packaging of our product. So there's two different tiers now, and the
yeah.
CS team needs to onboard people to these new tiers. So if you sit like in a marketing position and you do it all on your own, you should probably start asking questions and start going to the higher ups saying, "Do you really want me to spend time on this? Because the consequences are A, B, C, D."
Yeah, and they take time, especially as you accumulate mass as an organization. Like the bigger you are, these positioning shifts are just you turn the boat. When I turn a little speedboat, yeah, I can turn pretty quickly. There's only three of us. We can change the whole marketing plan over here in my company. I can change it almost on a dime. We're a small company. Whereas, if you're a 50-person, 100-person, 1,000-person company changing positioning, now you're steering the cruise liner. Like, all right, now we're cutting left. Well, guess what? It's going to take us some time for us to like get everybody going in that direction and for that boat to turn. And the stakes get higher too because we all often get this challenge of like, well, what about our old positioning? Does that die? Do we have to fire customers? And these are great questions. And these are where it's like, well, are you pivoting or are you broadening or are you shifting where you can still accommodate existing customers? And this creates some really operational challenges that I think you're really pulling on of like, well, we have a deck that sort of works. We have this new deck. Are we ready for it? And so this is why we think of positioning more as these long-term bets. And so like Klaviyo is actually a really interesting example that we came across recently where they've been positioning, obviously big Shopify player all around like optimizing journeys and that sort of thing. And
Yeah.
they just did this shift now, and it's on their homepage where they're calling themselves the CRM for B2C. And it's like this huge, it's like a big shift because in that context,
Hmm.
I have a bunch of friends who are running Shopify companies
Yeah.
and they don't see Klaviyo as a CRM. And so like Klaviyo's saying, yeah, but this is our longer term bet where they probably will hurt their existing kind of exposure and what's working. That's still going to run, right? It's running under the hood. They're still going to get
Hmm.
customers on their whole personalized messaging. There's probably campaigns running.
Yeah.
But in the longer term, they're starting to orient people around this new framing. And what's really happening, this is an example of kind of the expansion, the broadening for them. They're like, oh, we want to do more than what we're doing now. We actually see this being more exhaustive, more Salesforce-esque of like, oh, we can cover everything a B2C company does, not just these personalization flows.
I hadn't seen that one, Rob. That's super interesting. One of the things we were really paying attention to as we were kind of doing some adjustment or like expansion a little bit was that we didn't want to lose the brand awareness and the associations associated to what we currently did.
Yeah.
But our product had kind of outgrown the very small category. So we needed to kind of open up a little more. So the position covered the whole product and not just kind of parts of the product. So if we took a step too far, we would kind of lose all the value that we had built up in terms of brand awareness and demand in the market. So we were that we didn't dare to go from today to the vision, whereas it
Yep.
sounds like Clavio said, we're gonna go for the vision now, and then things will have to catch up afterwards. I guess
Yeah.
that's also a resource question why you can take a bit like that.
It is, yeah, and it's one of those things where is it a pivot or is it an expansion? And it sounds like in your case, is more of an expansion, as you described it, where you're just doing more, and so it's almost like you're gonna keep parts of your old positioning strategy, but you're gonna layer on more pieces. And from an existing customer base perspective, we get this question a lot, like, "What about our current customers? Will they actually engage with your marketing?" Like, they're already customers, and sure, they're gonna hear and see things, but as long as you're still doing what they came to you to do, you're in a good spot. It's only when the pivot happens where you do have to fire your customers, and, like, this is a reality for a lot of startups. Like, what gets you your first wave of growth, if the market shifts and you see a bigger opportunity, okay, that's a pivot. You will be firing those customers, and yeah, it sucks. You're basically saying, "I'm starting from scratch, but there's this bigger thing that we're going after." The mistake is like trying to keep it all going if it's not a unified expansion, because that's where you end up building multiple companies at the same time, and it's hard enough to build one startup. Like, don't go build multiple. It's madness.
I think one of the things that really kind of was an inflection point for us was settling on an ICP, an ideal customer profile definition, even before we
Yeah.
did positioning, just saying, because initially we just sold to every company that we could find,
Yeah.
just constantly just, okay, let's take this one, let's take this one. But it ended up for us having to build integrations over here and integrations over here. And this
Yeah.
company was small, this company was large. But so kind of we kind of just, because all marketers have problems with attribution. So we can go from
Mm.
a 5 people company to a 5,000 people company, but
Yeah.
you have to settle on something at least for a period in order to kind of make everyone in your company pull in the same direction.
Mm.
Which leads me to kind of, why are people so afraid of settling on a position? When you sell your service, are you the first positioning exercise that they do, or is it on top of something they have already been doing normally?
It's we're almost always layered on. Like,
Okay.
your founders are thinking through their positioning, whether they call it positioning or not. Like, they're trying to answer the questions of
Mm,
who are we for? What problem are we solving? What's our unique value? Like, again, even if they're not using that terminology, like, that's what they're working on when
yeah.
even they figure out what goes into the product roadmap. And so we're like meeting them where they're at. Like, hey, what's worked in the past? And it's interesting to hear your story of we would sell into everyone. That is when you're early, like that as a positioning strategy, like is a valid one. And we call that experimentation positioning, where you by design broadly position because you're like, I don't even know. I've got loose hunches, but I'm not ready to commit. And that's okay. You can do this. You just need to be mindful of time. You don't want to spend too much time in that experimentation, sell to everyone mode. And then you also have to be really realistic of it's never just going to jump out at you. Like, there's always going to have to be some human driven insight of like, okay, we sold to 20 companies. 3 of them are in this bucket, 4 of them are in this bucket, 5 are in this bucket, 4 of them are in this bucket. Like, it's always going to be kind of middling. But then to step back and be like, where do you think we could double down and really get repeatability going? And it's usually that decision, and that's where we built our service for. Like, our sweet spot is for companies that come in, they're around seed series A, they have traction, they've been selling to different people. But before they go dump millions of dollars into these go-to-market programs of where to double down, like, let's make sure we are choosing the right audience and the right angle with the bet that we think is going to work. And it's the ones that don't, that are like, no, there's growth everywhere, we're going to dump it into everything, where your story is just the horror story that happens. Product bloat just pulls your org apart, like feature requests. Operationally, there's fire drills, customer success is overwhelmed. And then marketing, like the week of marketing, the small team of even 3 to 5 people, is like, what do we create today? We've got 10 different markets and audiences that we're going after. And so they start hedging their bets, and again, you're just like betting, yeah, we can be known for 5 things to 5 different audiences. And it's like you're far better off being known for one thing. And
Mm,
then once you have that thing, then you can expand. And I know we're going to get into that. But if you look at even some of these like extremely successful companies, almost all of them had one super sharp edge, right? Like Stripe is always the example I go to. They've got 20 products, right? And they kind of, but they're, when you think of Stripe, what do you think of? payments. Like they're the payment company. They've got products that go way beyond payment. And they still lean into that today. And it's like you have to have that. It's like that momentum piece, let alone the revenue that comes along with it.
That's so interesting. And maybe let's talk just a little bit about the benefits here. Then, like once you get it right, what is it that you'll observe, Rob, in your organization?
Everything gets easier.
Yeah.
If that's it's like when you know what you're gonna say and you know who you're gonna focus on, but maybe more importantly, you know who you're not gonna focus on. Oh, it's such a powerful thing. And like my business, again, small service business, but there's nothing more empowering than like getting in front of like somebody comes in, they want to buy our thing, and then they explain what they're doing, and we're like, oh no, you don't need us. And being able to say that, and most startups won't say it. They're like, oh, yeah, we'll work this out, and they bend their product and they'll sell them. When you start saying no, is when you know you're really onto something. It's when you've drawn a line in the sand.
Hmm.
And what's really funny, two things happen. When you say no to people, they just want you more. And so it's not uncommon for people to come to us. They're shopping for something different. We're like, oh, you don't really need us. And then it just makes them want to buy us. And they're like, no, I'll get in line. I'll do exactly what you do. And then they instantly kind of pivot and become, oh, wow, you really are an ideal customer now if you're just trying to solve for this one thing. The other thing is you get this reverberated like trust and confidence that happens. And it's almost like via osmosis. They go back and tell people like there's this company, they were crazy, they said no to me, I was like holding money in front of them and they said no. What conviction. You almost get that word of mouth in addition to the people that come to you and are like, oh, this is exactly what I was looking for. And like that is the powerful compounding nature of positioning. And that's how you get more than a one-to-one word of mouth.
Yeah.
You get this like one to many aspect, which at the end of the day is what it's all about. Like, can't you be recognized for one thing? And word of mouth is the number one marketing mechanic you want to get moving.
Yeah, completely. And I just want to just repeat what you said at some point, Rob, which I think is gold. When you start saying no to stuff, then it's working, because then you get rid of customers you shouldn't have as customers. You get rid of features you don't need. You don't have to train the sales team to do a million different explanations. They just need to know these 10 different explanations, and then they'll do just fine.
Yeah.
So the whole organization becomes a lot more effective when you know what is it that we need to weed out of the way.
Yes. 100%.
That's so Rege here is writing something that I'll just read out loud for you.
Okay.
Great insights. Just a quick note from an engaged listener. Many B2B companies have had to cut back on proper data structure and governance for years. For most, this is where the AI journey really begins, not with fancy tools, but with getting the foundation right. It's important to include economy and timeline in the guidance so people don't feel like I could never afford that. Realistic advice builds confidence and momentum. So, what do you think about timeline and economy related to jumping into a positioning process? What should people prepare for?
Yeah, I guess I'm kind of looking at there's two angles I have to this. In terms of companies working on positioning and timeline, what they need to keep in mind is like building the positioning strategy can actually happen really quickly. And I know there's a note in here of like data governance, but that might be for something different. The mistake I see so many companies make is they think they can solve positioning with an analysis. And that's just not true. Analysis is important. Like you have to know your market, but like data isn't going to save you. This comes back to intuition. Data informs intuition. And so you can get stuck there, like hoping that, oh, we'll just keep running the data and it'll pop out what our positioning should be. And it's like, no. Like, look at your customer base, do a TAM analysis, and then get in the room and start making some of those hard decisions. That shouldn't take very long. It only takes long because of indecision and second guessing and a lack of conviction, which again is just a signal of like, are you really ready to make this choice or not? Are you really ready to position or not? And then once you position, the timeline aspect, when can I expect my positioning to start working? You need to be thinking in terms of, like, we see it in terms of years. At the shortest frame, it's 6 months, 6 to 9 months, but usually much longer, especially for B2B sales companies that have longer sales cycles. Because even just getting them in the room and getting people trained, like you're talking about these bigger shifts because it just takes time. Like at the end of the day, like good marketing and good positioning is just repeating yourself over and over and over. And so like take Anthony and myself, like we've been on LinkedIn for 3 years saying the same thing for 3 years, and we found 1,000 different ways to hopefully creatively and entertainingly and insight led get
Yeah.
people to understand what we're working on. And I would say, we've had success to that, like not necessarily from the beginning, like we like it's kind of grown. But
Mm.
only now, 3 years in, are we really starting to see some of the reverberating components where like our
Yeah.
name comes up and people are like, oh, I heard you here, I heard you here, I heard you here. It's like that doesn't happen in 90 days,
No.
right? Like it just people have to hear your name over and over and over. And even then it has to be shaped. Like, because I'm even thinking, I remember like we were a year in and people would show up to us and they're like, you're the copywriting guys, right? It's like, well, sorta. That wasn't exactly what we were trying to frame. And so like people are gonna miss the map. They're gonna put you in their own boxes and like everyone has their own perspective. And so like it just takes time to hone that. Like you're trying to literally shape people's belief systems. And
Yeah.
it doesn't happen with an ad. It doesn't happen in an A/B test. And so yeah, year-long horizons in terms of timeline. But the actual strategy development could be created really quickly, as quick as a day. We do it in a week or two, but then it's more, what are you going to do over the next like 12 months to actually execute that? And then looking back at it, usually every 3 to 6 months, just to course correct, but it shouldn't be major shifts.
Yeah. There's so many contradicting thoughts in my mind right now.
Yeah, share them. Hey, in the contradictions is usually the insight.
Yeah,
Bring
it's
it
so
up.
interesting because that also, I completely agree about the time it takes to change a memory in some people's mind. So today is day zero where you put out new messaging. Then people need to go to your website to read the new positioning, or they need to be exposed to ads, or they need to participate in webinars, and maybe they didn't show up at the first webinar, so they need to join the next webinar. So I
Yeah.
100% behind that very long tail of changing people's
And
mind.
even the customers you've served, right? Like if let's say we served customers in the beginning, and I'll go extreme, we didn't do this, but let's say we did copywriting for a company. We deliver it, and for the next 18 months, that company might be like, yeah, they did great copywriting. They did great copywriting when, a week after working with them, we shifted to like, no, 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 it's more about positioning. Copy's a part of it, but it's more about positioning. That company is out there spreading the experience they had with our copywriting service.
Yeah.
And so you can have these different things out into the wild that you just have to wrangle.
Like even now we kind of use G2 reviews as an example as well. We every quarter we go through the sprint of trying to collect new reviews, and from the moment we put out a new feature which is in a different direction to where we were, there will be like a 6 or 12 month cycle of them using that product before we can go ask for a review that's about something else than what we originally only did. So
Yeah.
it just takes a long time. Let's do some live questions here because I think that's how we can help people a lot. So
For
here's
sure.
Nadja saying, I have 7,000 customers from micro businesses to enterprises in different industry, and they are using the product in 1,000 different ways. How do I choose the right ICP or the right use case or the right industry to focus on? I think this is a classic. If you haven't
Yeah.
been doing it before, what's the A to C here of finding out where to focus? What would you
Yeah.
guys do?
Well, you're describing half of our clientele at least. I mean, you're on the extreme end in terms of use cases, but I'm actually working with a client right now that almost fits exactly a customer. You may be a little bit further along than them, but basically they have an extremely horizontal product. And so actually the context on this, their product is it's like a text to video product. You add text, it'll generate videos for you,
Yeah.
right? Very horizontal. It's like, what could that be used for? Well, it could be used for employee onboarding, it could be used for sales enablement, it can be used for all these things. And they're in your exact spot where different people are coming to them with these different challenges. And the underlying question, Naja, to think about is, and maybe you've already answered it, is there a unified way where everyone does have the same use case where you could articulate what you're doing? And so this company we're working with, for them, it's create a video. And so they've been positioning around, hey, go from text to video. The issue, though, is exactly what you're surfacing. It's not specific enough because someone who's trying to create an onboarding intro video wouldn't just say, I'm trying to create a video. They would actually be like, oh, they might not even use video. They're like, oh, I'm trying to create like an onboarding course. And
Yeah.
sure, it'll have video, but I'm trying to create an onboarding course. So when they bump into your marketing and you're like, I create videos really well, it's like, okay, this could fit, but it's not perfect. And so in terms of how you decide, if I were you, I would, and you have 7,000 customers, so this would be a little tricky, but I would basically audit your existing customer base and I would map those use cases. Like, how many are there? You say 1,000. How many really are there? What you'll start to notice is they'll probably start to fall into different buckets where, maybe there's not 1,000, maybe there's 100 of sorts. And then I would just look at them and again, this is where data can guide, but this is where your intuition has to be, is like, who's the stickiest?
Mm,
who is the easiest to sell to, who actually sticks around, who's getting value, who's actually like talking about you in a positive way. Those are all really good signals of where you should double down, because that's where you're already starting to get some of that positive momentum of like, no, we really do have fit. Because what you're describing in this example is like, you don't have fit, you have incredible traction. And in your case, I would go super narrow, get that really repeatable, and then I'd move on to the next. Now, counterexample to all of this, and this might be, I don't know enough about your product, but you almost remind me a little bit of Zapier, right? When Zapier, their early positioning, they were, sure, we're an automation tool, right? Like we do integration automation,
mm,
really integrations. I shouldn't say automation. We're an integration tool, right? Their homepage, and even today, and again, they actually just did a pivot, so maybe it's a bad current example, but they position broadly for integrations. But where their positioning really lived was in I think it was like 9,000 plus sub landing pages via long tail SEO.
yeah.
Here's how you connect LinkedIn with Airtable. Here's how you connect HubSpot with so and so. And like, those are very unique, very small market positions.
Mm,
And their strategy was basically, hey, rather than having a unified positioning, we're going to win long tail. And so this is one of those extreme examples where they're like, we are going to go have 1,000 positions in the market. Now, this only works if they were willing to commit to the 10-year long tail journey. And their founders have talked about this. They're just like,
yeah.
we knew it was going to take a while, but we started specific and then we layered
Mm,
until eventually these integration tools started to formulate as a category where they could start to position as a company. They have a main positioning of like,
mm,
yeah, you should use us and not make type
mm.
of a deal. And so those are a couple of thoughts there. Ultimately, it comes down to like, what's your willingness for risk? How many resources do you have? And who's sticky? Like, stickiness is really a signal of fit. Like, go focus on that group first, really get that humming. And it doesn't mean you can't serve these other 6,000 customers. It just means you won't market to them in the short term.
I think if you read April Dunford's book, she also talks about focusing on your 20% best customers rather than just kind of an average customer. Like
Yeah.
figure out what defines your best customers. Like, is it deal size? Is it excitement about the product? Is that these people always renew? And try to look at the traits
Yeah.
of those, the 20% best of the 7,000 customers you had, and just focus on like honing in on how do we position for them so we can get more of those that are in the best bucket.
Yeah. And it's so counterintuitive because the fear many of the founders have that when we work with them, oh, but the market's too small. And so they do this trade-off of big TAM. Like they're basically saying, yeah, I'll do a big TAM with an extremely inefficient marketing program where I could never stand out. Like that's basically the decision they're making
Yeah.
versus a small market where they have a chance to dominate.
Mm.
And our
Yes.
view, like you don't have to believe in it. Like our view is the second one is by far the best strategy because then once you dominate, what people miss is you then have this incredible momentum. We talked about competitive edges and advantages. When you start to move into the broader market, you'll be the only one that says, oh, and we dominated this market, right? So, like my company, Fletch, right? We do B2B SaaS positioning. If we ever wanted to scale and expand, we could move into e-commerce homepages and what a better way to move into that market to then be able to say, yeah, we've already worked with 1,000 of the best B2B startups and now we're taking our model and moving it into e-com versus starting out and saying, oh, we do homepages.
I think this is where kind of also it's so easy, and I can reflect that on our own journey to get confused by what's positioning when you're in a fundraising process, when you talk to investors that want to see an incredibly large addressable market.
Yeah.
But very large addressable market is like a very fucked up way to try to do positioning because you
Yeah.
come with a very slim go-to-market budget, and in order
Yeah.
to make that very efficient, you need to select a very narrow slice of the market and have some very specific messaging. Get your ads in front of those people. So I
Yeah.
think investors can get turn
Yeah.
founders' heads upside down sometimes when investors talk about positioning. They talk about a vision, but
Yeah.
how you go to market practically today is talking about what is it that your product does for a very select group of people.
Yeah, and that's that type of positioning is usually it's reverse looking. Like in hindsight, you could look back and be like, oh, look, they revolutionized this market and they changed these things. But when you go and actually see how it matriculated, like it never happens that way. It's always like step by step. There is an exception though for founders like who are going after a big TAM, and it's when you have some type of extreme distribution advantage. And so these show up in a couple different forms. One that a lot of these founders try and lean into is a true like product-led growth mechanic, really an expansion mechanic. And so I think like Loom is a good example, Calendly is a good example where like if you just like plant the seed like a virus, it's naturally going to get more and more people to see it. Right. But this is rare. Like most products don't have this. They have like small bits of it, and founders mistakenly say, oh no, I'm betting on that. The other types of these like distribution advantages are access. Like, do you have access to a big partner network? Or do you have like, are you actually partnered with someone? Like, can you partner with a Salesforce and tap into their sales network? I have a friend who leads a very big product effort over at Microsoft. They're building basically a healthcare AI product for physicians. And it's wild because they have this huge distribution advantage. So he's basically building a startup inside of Microsoft. And I was talking to him. He's like, oh yeah, in our first 6 months, we plan to do 20 million in revenue. We actually almost already have it on the books. And I'm like, what are you talking about? He's like, oh yeah, we slide the SKU over to the sales team. And suddenly I have 30,000 people out there talking about my product to people that they're already connected with, existing customers. Well, that's great, but not everyone is Microsoft. And this is why the incumbents have that advantage overall. And so exceptions to that TAM piece, but you're exactly right. Most startups have to position for their investors and then kind of do the opposite when they get into actually building the marketing for their company. Like, great, this is where I will go. 10-year vision of my positioning. Here's my 10-month vision for my positioning, and they're just drastically different.
Yeah, and I'm imagining also a little bit related to, you also have to consider what are the exactly what you say, kind of what are the resources we have available to cement of a certain position. And if you want to succeed in a very broad market, that basically means you need to have a lot of dollars to spend because you're going to have to reach a lot of people. And
or you believe in your ability, like social's free. And this is where we go back to edges. Like, can you figure out distribution quickly? And so, like, we built our business on LinkedIn. We basically were making the bet of like, I bet we can get LinkedIn to work as a channel. And we kind of sucked at the beginning, but it's a process to get really, really good. And now it's an extreme edge for us. It's an execution edge for distribution. And those are the angles that I encourage these companies to look at when we ask them, because it doesn't always have to be money, but it's a pretty good heuristic of like time and money and where you're going to invest that as a limited resource.
Yeah, and as for somebody who's been following you and both you and Anthony for more than a year, I have to say 2 years, I can definitely recommend following you guys because the content is super great. Maybe you can just do like a detour, Rob, and say how does content creation look at Fletch BMM? Where do you
sure.
years from? How do you produce compelling content to follow up on the idea that you have?
Yeah. This it's a detour, but I actually think it's quite relevant in a lot of ways, because all we're really doing is sharing our perspective on the problem we think we solve and trying to be as helpful as possible. And so what I encourage all the companies we work with to do is to think about their marketing as consulting in public about the problem they solve. But most don't do this. They think about their marketing as promotion, right? How do I get people to know my product? If you follow us, we don't talk about our service. Like, we've done thousands of posts over the past few years. Maybe 5 of them, 10 of them were like, hey, check out our service, or we got a discount going or something. But like, that's not the content. It's not the purpose.
Yeah.
We're trying to build trust at scale. And so our process, our mechanic for this, and it's evolved a little bit as we've like progressed and get to exposure to all these companies. In the beginning, when we didn't have customers, it was basically research and opinion. So Anthony and I were going deep into product marketing, deep into positioning. We were spotlighting things that we thought were interesting. We would talk about them and then just share them. Like, we thought they were interesting. We're like, oh, people might think this is interesting. And it literally started of like, is anybody else seeing this? Like, we just read a bunch of homepages. I don't know what the hell they do. Does anybody else see this? And that was our first like thread to pull.
Yeah.
And then we just went deeper and deeper as it has evolved and we started getting customers. We were just writing about our work. We get in the room, we work with hundreds of founders. Hey, we ran into this challenge. It's like, hey, there was this company, they were PLG. They had these 2 options. Here's how we unpacked the question. And here's a little framework we used to try and make the decision. We're basically just giving our free advice that we gave in the room, and we're packaging it up. And the beauty for us being a service consultant business is that we actually started then creating assets to help the service and then front facing it. And so most of the assets that you see are just things that we have. If you've ever worked with us, we just like slide over to the left of our working zone, and there's all these key concepts and frameworks like, we're having trouble with this. Let's look at this. We've already written about this extensively. We've got a bunch of examples. And so the other way to think about it is just like doing the work, sharing what we learned and getting it in a way that's easy to teach. And it's like the cycle is do it, argue with Anthony. Anthony and I
Yeah.
literally spend hours each day on the phone arguing about concepts. And we argue from a point of like, can you convince the other person of your point, knowing that if like we come to an alignment, it means there probably is a shareable insight and a shareable nugget there. And so like this is why from marketing teams and focus, having a sparring partner, it goes back to resources. Like you can't put a marketer on an island. Like they need room to iterate within the group and within the product. And we're just, that loop for us is super tight. And so all you're seeing on LinkedIn is basically a regurgitation of all the work we're doing in sessions and all the countless hours Anthony and I spend arguing about concepts. And that's it. We just run face it with the thesis that, hey, if we give it all away for free, you'll eventually come to us if you get stuck. And so far that's been true.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. Is it true also, if my memory like is being nice to me, you very often have some kind of visual going along, like you have a really nicely written thing, but then you also have a visual that kind of conceptualizes whatever the post is about.
Yep, we do. And we stumbled upon that, right? And this is why now we're getting more into like go-to-market strategy. Like, okay, we have a positioning, and this is the second thing that a lot of these early stage companies get wrong. It's never been easier to be in every channel today. Marketing automation tools, AI content creation. Oh, post here, it'll throw it everywhere. The issue when you're early is it's all going to be mid. It's like generic, not quality. Each medium is its own nut to crack. And so we spent a lot of time coming up with different ways to express ideas on LinkedIn. It was like all text, short text with an image. Do we do video? Is there animations? How long should the post be? Like just hundreds and hundreds of iterations. And what we found was like, oh, these images, like it kind of, we got more exposure. And so it stopped the scroll. That was the first thesis. And then what we realized is then it made our stuff shareable. What if we could take a really complex idea and make it simple, where
Yeah.
then our assets sort of live in perpetuity in people's minds and in their like saved account page on their LinkedIn. And so that really quick, we're like, okay, this works. Where we then went all in on that. And even that has a science to it of like, how much do you put into the post? There was a time where like if you jammed as many ideas and examples into the image, you could go viral. That's sort of shifted. And then also it's just then harder to get across a point. And so we're kind of more back to like one core concept in each post is what we shoot for. But that's an evolution, right? And it's funny, we thought, and this is just where this breaks, let's just go put this on Twitter or X, right? And we started to experiment with it. Doesn't work. Twitter's a whole different animal, right? Like there's a different way to build an audience over there. And so this focus of like channel specificity, I mean, we're multiple years in, we still only do LinkedIn. And we will eventually layer on other growth motions. But for us, like so far, demand has exceeded our capacity. Like, why will layer on these other pieces? And if we had started trying to be everywhere, there's no way we'd have the exposure and recognition that we have now. Not a chance.
No, I agree. Super nice. Thanks for explaining that, Rob. If we do a little bit of a chapter change here with just 10, 15 minutes left, we're living through obviously an AI boom right now, which all of us who do some kind of technology product have to kind of consider at least, but probably also have to adjust, rethink, change positioning. I'm wondering what's your kind of stance on how much companies need to lean into AI, or is AI the gimmick itself that you utilize AI as a way to deliver your value, or does it need to be the other way around? You position the pain that you solve, and then one of the tools that solves the pain is AI. What's your kind of like, let's start with the overall reflection of that because it's like a seismic shift that changes technology right now. How much positioning needs to change along with that?
Yeah, there's a few points here, and I'll let you kind of pull on a few of the things I say. The one thing to just keep in mind that everyone needs to understand is AI is just a technology, right? And there's going to be technologies after it, just like there's technologies before it of these evolutions of, electricity to lights to internet to all these other things. It is not the product. And this is where right now I think the mistakes are happening. And then I say mistakes, it's more just like there is this shift, it's very real. But the challenge AI has right now is like, what's the best use case for it? What markets does it actually play into? And this is where the fundamentals haven't changed. Like you still have to solve a real problem 10x better. So this just goes into that product building, identifying audiences. Your question of like how much they should be leaning into AI, it's audience dependent. And in general, winter ran a study around AI, and there's been some other studies where, like, in general, AI and copy is actually annoying people. It's like not helping. Now, there's an exception, and we saw this maybe more so a year ago. I'm sure we'll still start to see it, but when AI was like first really coming on and people started like tinkering being the word, we had to work out this thing with these founders of like, are you going after an early adopter market?
Mm,
Because there is in any industry or in any context, there's usually a group of people that are trying to look far ahead and they're looking for an extreme competitive advantage and they see technology as a big lever for that.
yeah.
These were the folks early in AI that were just buying AI to like buy AI. And their whole thinking was, I don't even know what I'm going to use this for yet.
No.
I just know it's going to be big. It's going to change the way my business operates. And I think it'll help me get ahead. And that's great. Like, but the question is, are you positioning for that group? If so, say AI, right? Say it. Hey, we have AI. We think it can do all these crazy things. You got to see it. Where you're really just demoing the technology. And these companies are usually looking for like partners to go build it with you. And they're willing to shoulder a lot of the risk of like, I'll worry about how to get in my org. I'll help you figure out the use cases. We'll pay you a bunch of money. And that's great. But it's also a trap for a lot of these AI startups, right? Because sure, that's your initial revenue. But the majority of the market is sitting back going, I don't know what the hell I'm going to use this for yet.
Yeah.
And so they're going to wait and see until and Jeffrey Moore goes in. This is basically the crossing the chasm scenario. They're basically going to wait and see of like, is this going to be used in a significant way where I can pinpoint it to replace what I'm doing now? It's a much more pragmatic approach to those audiences. They don't care about AI. They care about what they're doing, what problem they're bumping into, and all they care about is like, do you solve it better? They don't care about what's under the hood, right? And so those are the questions we start to ask of like, how much AI are we going to lead into with the foundation that at the end of the day, unless you're actually selling AI, like you're an open AI competitor or in that realm, like AI isn't your product. It's just a technology that powers your product. And you should be focusing on the second part of that. Like, what's the product actually do? What's it for? Who
Yeah.
cares what actually is under the hood?
From a B2B marketing perspective, it's been interesting to see the last 1.5 year unfold where
Yeah.
there were some companies that just overnight slapped AI on all over the front page, trying to say now we are an AI company as well, but the features were probably the same.
Yeah.
And then there's others that haven't moved on it that fast. And
And
then
is it 10x better is the question, right? Like, because that's the underlying thing. Like to get people to change what they're doing, like AI is just a level up on automation of sorts that software already does. Is the agentic automation truly better?
yeah.
And that's where just context matters. Because if it's like, oh wow, that was better, it's like, but what I have now is pretty good.
I think what you're really right in saying that you need to monitor the specific industry you're in, because I think there is industries where AI is sort of becoming table stakes. If
Yeah.
I cannot buy your product if you don't have like an AI roadmap that will kind of make sure that we utilize all the powers that AI has in it. So I'd say people should like speak to your customers, ask the prospects, how much does AI matter in our industry? And if you've
Yeah.
spoken to 50 or 100 of these prospects and customers, then you probably have a pretty good impression on whether you should double down on the positioning your company as utilizing AI technology.
And you're framing right there, like, is AI a box to check or is it the leading component? If someone's coming to you for like that FOMO scenario, I don't want to be left behind, chances are it's not a leading component. They're not out there trying to be on the bleeding edge. They're just like, oh, I'm buying a new CRM. And like, oh, what are you guys doing about AI? I keep hearing about it. Like, oh yeah, we're building the infrastructure. Okay, great. Well, I'll get there when we get there. But that's a secondary sales proposition, not the leading marketing proposition, if that is indeed the mindset of your audience. Like, no, I want to make sure it does this, but I also want to make sure that it's sort of future proof. Just a different audience altogether.
I can't help think about also at least what we see here and there is also that some prospects, they've bought into the vision of AI, saying that the world is going to become a better place. I would never have to do work again if I just find a vendor that utilizes AI in the right way. I just pay the bill and
Sure.
our company grows.
Yeah.
But I can't help wondering either how good customers they're going to be if they don't actually care about what's going on beneath the hood. Does it actually solve the act that these guys have? But we
Yeah, that's a
definitely
fair question.
we see
It's there's
AI,
another point in here.
the
Sorry to interject.
yeah,
There's this aspect too, is like we're in this B2B SaaS startup tech bubble, right? And so, and
100%.
this is kind of a trap. Like AI is in front of us all day long. We're all using it, but the world is not equal in the awareness of it. Like go ask people who are in these laggard industries, and man, they're just getting used to Google, right? Like they're not even thinking about AI. I've got a friend who's in like a very big consulting firm that does like ocean engineering and all this stuff, and he's like, yeah, I keep hearing about AI, but we're not using it. And I'm just like, oh my god, if you were at, in a startup realm, like you're 10 years behind. And like what's interesting is like that's where a lot of the opportunities are to apply AI.
Yeah.
But to those groups, you don't go running into them where they're like, yeah, we just got rid of our dot matrix printer. It's like, okay, great. I'm not going to run after you with like, oh, you should use AI. It's just like, hey, I see you have this process over here. Like, I can do that 10x cheaper, 10x faster. Should we talk? And like, you
Yeah.
have to like spoon feed it to them. And so like, it's tricky for companies selling to these tech companies because that's where you get a lot of the my AI is better, your AI is better. Like,
Yeah.
where sometimes you don't even have to make that argument
Yeah.
in some of the markets.
I'm really glad just talking a little bit about it, because it is, at least in our bubble, we have to kind of think about that AI a question at the moment. Rob, if we have to kind of crystallize everything you have learned and Anthony has learned about positioning full time for more than 3 years now, what are kind of one of the most, what comes to mind when we talk about what is the most impactful change in behavior that founders and marketers can do if they've not thought about positioning before?
Yeah. Whew. It's a big question. The one thing I think, if I'm a founder and I haven't really thought diligently about positioning, I would like one of the first things I would do is and we talked a little bit about this. I would audit my existing customer base, and I would ruthlessly look at why people took the first call and make sure it's the first call. And I'm using the word ruthless because the trap is, no, they bought for a different reason. But why did they show up? What did they come to you for? And I would put this into buckets of like, what was their use case? And I would let that list get as long as it needs to get. And then I would look at it and just ask myself, like, wow, do we really, like, I know our product can address all these things, but what you're looking at every time that number jumps on use cases means that we have to then go build marketing programs around this to get people through the front door. And I think hopefully that'll put a little bit of fear into the founders who think they have fit, because fit is when people repeatably know you for one thing. And I'll borrow an analogy from Rob Schneider, who does a lot of startup work. You have fit and you have a repeatable motion when you can go replace all the logos on your case studies and the stories are exactly the same. They all came in with the same problem in the same use case. You solved it in the same way and they all got the same value. But really, markets are messy. And so understanding, especially in B2B, markets are messy. Markets are extremely fragmented, and they're bigger than you think. If I could boil that into one thing, like, don't fear being specific. As
Yeah.
an early stage company with limited resources, it is the biggest lever you have for perceived differentiation. And I'll put it this way, until you can own a really niche market, you have no chance of winning a bigger market.
Yeah.
And sure, 0.0001, okay, there's a chance. You have no chance of winning. Like, if you can't win in the minor leagues, what makes you think you're going to hit home runs in the big leagues? Like, no shot.
It's funny whenever I speak to like also founder types or like smaller companies, it's always go more narrow, stop selling to those, skip that channel. Like,
Yeah.
don't do all of the things, just narrow, specific.
Yeah.
That's where you get traction.
And it's easy to say, it's hard to do, but once you feel it happen and see it happen, and again, that's hard. Like, I can't give you the experiences that I've had or seen with these companies, but when you see it working, like, you can never unsee it, of like, wow, how powerful it is when people show up and they know who you are and they know why you're valuable and the sale is easy and the service is easy and they're happy because what they thought they were buying was what you said you were selling. Like, nothing beats that. And so if your business feels like the constant divergent sell, dynamic scope, constant fire drills, like, take a good hard look at your definition of your market. It's almost certainly too broad.
Fantastic. That's a good way to end, Rob. If people want to follow along or talk more with you or Fletch PMM, what path do you want to send them on?
Yeah, LinkedIn's definitely the path. Follow along with Anthony or myself. We're pretty easy to find on LinkedIn. We're trying to post daily. You can also go back through, like, we try and make everything as transparent as possible. Shoot us a DM, join the comments. Like, we try and engage with everybody that reaches out. And if you have positioning issues, like, go check out our site, and hopefully that acts as a good example of like, hey, this is what we think good positioning is. We front face the whole process. And so go watch the video if you think we might be able to work with you on your own positioning. Those are the two things: our website and LinkedIn.
Yeah, I just want to plug your before and after section because I found great joy looking at that, where you show what did the company's homepage look like before you did the work and what did it look like afterwards, because that really helps you see
Yeah.
kind of where is it that we need to head. So go check out the Fletch BMM website.
Thanks, man.
That's it for today, everybody. Thank you so much for listening in. And Rob, I just want to say thank you so much for sharing all these great insights today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. Great session.
We hope you like listening to us. Subscribe to our podcast and the ones that we have been guests on.
And if you have any feedback for us, just do let us know. And should there be a guest that you think we should be talking to, then pitch us.
We're looking forward to seeing you.